Ladies and gentlemen, the Kids in the Room podcast. Kids in the Room podcast.
That's right. That's right.
Brought to you by Moo Faces TV.
Woo! All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Kids in the Room podcast. Today, we've got my friend Ron Shigeta on the podcast today, who is an amazing person. Ron, tell us who you are. Tell us what's special about you. Yeah.
Thanks, Tavares. Well, you know, we got talking online about I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've done about 100 venture capital investments, and I also advise startups. And I just my latest work has been to open a studio helping startups get started. And the portfolio just crossed the $1 billion mark last December, and this makes me want to come out and talk about it.
Wow, $1 billion. That's pretty awesome. $1 billion.
Well, it's not all my money. It's just how much all the companies are worth put together.
You're like Daddy Warbucks. You're like, the guy who swims in money, right?
I like what I like to do is I like to make people who have this something really fantastic. I want that to help them be successful, to really feel the potential in their ideas. And so if someone's got a fabulous idea, I want to talk to them and I want to help them make it real.
That's amazing. What does a fabulous idea entail to you? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, I've had this crazy career, and recently, like the last 7 years of my life has just been this incredible like roller coaster. I was a regular PhD scientist before, and I had a good job. It was not something I could tell people about. It might put them to sleep. I would sit at a computer screen all day and process genomes and look at protein sequences and all this stuff. But I wanted to really get my hands in it. And so living in the Bay Area, I ended up being a venture capital investor after some work. And me and a couple other guys, we started this shop downtown called Indie Bio. We invested in synthetic biology biotech companies. And we helped create basically the startup biotech economy now. And so I was lucky enough, I got to pioneer on that. For 4 years, made 80 investments, and that portfolio is worth about $5 billion now, all told. So I'm kind of seeing it again now with my own shop, and the ideas that we were able to get a hold of, they were first in class, first in the world. Like the world's first lab-grown meat company we invested in is called now it's called Upside Foods. It was such a new idea, nobody could actually believe it might work. And now there's almost 200 lab-grown meat companies starting up all over the world, doing all kinds of work. And so it's just been crazy to see all these sort of like realities unfolding around these ideas. They're completely new. So yeah, when I'm talking something special, I'm talking about an idea that's just makes you stop in your tracks and think, I have to rethink about the world. I can't see things the same anymore, And those ideas come across once in a while, but they often die on the vine, and so they really deserve to be heard. That's what I do.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. It's very impressive. So I want to ask you and dig in a little bit more. You're talking about, hey, I've invested into these companies that are, pushing out synthetic meat. Like, what drove you to invest in companies that are working on this type of synthetic type of meat? Like, are you not a meat eater? Like, what was it?
I'm actually a biologist, and I've been a bioscientist for my entire adult life, and but it's always been sitting behind the glass wall in the university for as long as I've been around, and a couple decades, just watching that happen and people making all this fantastic discoveries, and it doesn't change people's lives. And so it's coming to the time where biotechnology now will come and help us with our sustainability problems, with our recyclable renewability problems, with all the things that we use and we buy, we eat and we wear, and drive or whatever else that we do. We need a new way of living, and technology is going to change that to make everything fall back into balance because we can design it that way. It's a huge idea, really. And so exciting.
That's pretty awesome. What's your favorite type of like synthetic type of meat so far, right? That's out right now.
So this is crazy. So actually, you know McKinsey, McKinsey, the accounting research firms like Global Business Leader, whatever, they put out this report. Tavares is a 400-page report. They went over all these different cases, and they discovered hundreds of cases where biotechnology exists today could change and really provide impact to manufacturing, to the way we use things. So some of them are medical. Look, we're used to hearing about this in terms of drugs and surgeries and all kinds of medical treatments. But, genomic sequence is now starting to impact our health and well-being, our beauty, the clothes we wear, the food we eat, and the beverages we drink. They're all sort of being re-examined to how can we sort of make something healthier, but also cheaper, more accessible to more people, So what's going to happen over the next 50, 60 years is these wave after wave of new generations of this tech helping to sort of create sustainability and quality for everything that we use. Right now it's with food, but there's other waves coming right now.
What kind of waves?
So just to like catch everybody up on food was the first thing we invested in that really blew people's mind. The investors came. Back when I started 8 years ago, it was really, really difficult to find a venture capitalist who would fund any given thing. You bring a startup in, we gave them a little money, we bring them into our lab, and they get to work for a while. They put together some prototypes and MVPs, and they'd go out, and people would look at them and just say, sounds really interesting. I'm not going to invest. We would have to go home and pray that they would actually fund these things. And now the situation is really different. People are embracing these new ideas. So the first thing that really hit it off was meat and animal products. So we funded a company called it's called Every now. It used to be called Clara Foods. They made egg whites without chickens. They were able to just sort of create the proteins. Egg whites are mostly protein, a little bit of salt and water. They're able to just produce the proteins outside the chickens, put them together, and you got a perfect egg white. They're a $1 billion company now, approximately. They just closed a huge round, and they're going to start providing basically food that's exactly the same as if it had eggs, but there's no animal producing it. And that really changes sustainability and its cost and its quality. Huge difference, right? So, meat, so meat and eggs and dairy, milk, ice cream, all these things are sort of coming out as first wave.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I think it matters about sustainability to scale. Like when you're thinking about these products that we consume daily, mm-hmm. And but also I think too, there's a bigger issue, and it is basically how a human consumes those products, like how it tastes, right? Absolutely. Like if it doesn't taste authentic, then it doesn't really matter to most of us to scale how healthy it is. And so for me, I've always looked for what tastes almost, where there's just like parity to real meat. Right?
That's the most amazing thing about this latest generation of companies is that they've hit upon this killer app, right? The killer idea is that, look, we can get people to eat more sustainable food that's not made from animals. The use of animals in agriculture is responsible for about, some people say 25 to 30% of all the greenhouse gas emissions. And so that's just, meat, we can actually not eat it. But the brilliant idea is to give people food that is exactly the same, where they don't have to make a choice between giving up something that they've always eaten and not. We just have these other products. They don't have the animal impact, but they taste the same. They are the same. When you make meat cells outside the animal and you put them together, they're pretty good steak. I've had them.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what's coming. It's going to come in the next few years. In Embryville, California here, there's a 50,000 square foot plant. They're making the first lab grown meat there that's going to be in restaurants, they hope, next year in San Francisco. And from there, it should just keep going and be available all around the world.
Wow. That's pretty rad. Biology is awesome.
Biology is like,
it's awesome.
Best.
It's
too bad.
Awesome.
It's too bad people don't get more of it really in school. They don't get the fun part. They only get the
boring.
Memorize this. It just feels like a task. It's too bad, but I think there's going to be more and more fun that people can see, and hopefully that'll help people get into it and get interested.
What got you into it? What got you into biology?
I started in the chemistry department, and I just started realizing that, chemicals are boring. I mean, they'll react and they'll form reactions. They'll make something new, but they'll make waste, and they're a little toxic. But biology, everything you do with biology it's basically like groceries. You can experiment and make some DNA or something, but once you're done with it, people just throw, you put this, the bacteria are pretty innocuous. They don't do anything. You just wash them off your hands with soap and water. You're clean. And they are the most complicated, most beautiful things to work with as a scientist. It's like an alien freaking spaceship, tavares. Like the average cell, it's designed by 1 billion years of evolution, and no human being knows how it works. It's just a crazy place to play.
Yeah, it's even so crazy that, when we start talking about biology and we talk about the design, it's like, I don't know, it's almost like there's, for those who, don't believe in some type of intelligent design, it's like, who the fuck did this? Like, how did this all, like, how did this spark? Like this complex being, this complex, source, like how did all this just like create itself? It's just like so beautiful to think, did everything create itself, or is there some type of maker? It's interesting, when you dig down into it.
It is. It's a pretty deep question. And despite the fact a lot of people say they know the answer, I don't think that it's possible to really prove the answer to that question. But one thing you see is, one thing you definitely get studying biology is that you understand how deep the rabbit hole goes. Finally. I mean, like you can sort of say, oh, you can see some news and say that didn't happen by accident. It's a conspiracy, or it isn't, and you can debate about that, but it's usually pretty simple. Like someone decided to lie or something like that. In biology, when you want to understand how a bacterium swims or how birds fly, what you discover is you can point at one thing and say, I understand how that works, but you just move a little to the side and suddenly you don't understand it anymore. That like everything, I don't think there's any molecule in the cell that biologists truly understand everything about how it works. We're always discovering some new role for everything. And it's just like by hook or crook, over 1 billion years, all these molecules do so many things. And you just can't tell where life starts and where the minerals and chemicals end. It's just this amazing orchestra playing inside every cell of your body, every cell and every plant. I just love it. And it's so powerful, right?
Yeah. I don't know. That's interesting. You said something about you don't know where, it's kind of hard to tell where minerals and was it cells, or what would you say?
Where do the minerals end and the life start?
The life start. Okay, yeah.
I mean, people are trying to put together try to put together like DNA and lipids and different parts of the cell together to make a living system that reproduces in a test tube. We're getting to the point where we can do that, but just to get to the point where the cell will duplicate itself and just keep the chromosomes separate, it's already so complicated. You have to start putting in like shovelfuls of different kinds of molecules in there. It's not sort of, let's mix these 3 things together, we got life. And like, there's like maybe like 50 or 70 things. You start putting these things together, and suddenly as soon as there's like so much stuff, you can't quite understand what everything's doing. Then you start getting action. It's amazingly complex. It's very humbling to understand, what our limits are in terms of appreciating how these systems work. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, that is pretty deep. It's pretty complex. It's pretty wild how complex things are, and even just like the human species and, our survival, and then just like social behaviors and things like that over time. But I guess I probably have some other questions on the point of, you got into biology, through, taking some classes in high school per se, or
I went all the way through my PhD.
Okay, cool. But
yeah.
But like, what was the original like interest in this? Like, was there something in your childhood earlier on that
I love things that are not understandable. And, I mean, like you get in a position, like you get in a business like art, and there's a certain number of colors and there's certain kinds of ways media use and art supplies used to make art. There's terms like, just like politics, a lot of careers are just made out of terms that people made. And so they're kind of social things, which is great. But if you understand people, you can sort of understand the world. But like, I just love the open-endedness of biology because, like I say, biology is something nobody understands. We just don't understand how the cells work. We understand a lot, but it's just an ongoing process. And I just love that open-ended thing. It's like exploring another planet. That's where I'd like to be. I want to be on Mars. I don't really want to stay home, And so that's really what brought me into it. And that's what got me to basically keep changing careers. I've changed careers multiple times the last 10 years. And I like it much better than just like going to a PhD program and getting my job as a scientist and sort of doing the same old thing. I could have ended up staying in my last science job. Probably I'd still be in it today if I wanted to be, but I love just doing something new all the time. That's what I like.
Yeah, that's pretty deep. I get it, doing something new all the time. But I guess I also wanted to say is like, as well as like, you're at the place and you start understanding like these deep things about biology. Did you start, getting any interest into like cancer? Like what is cancer? Like what is cancer and, what is not cancer when you really like break it down?
Well, cancer is kind of a mysterious process. Not every living animal gets cancer, which is an interesting fact, but most animals do. Certainly human beings do. And I guess it's, to me, on a very simple level, it's just that cancer is a place where some of your cells decide they're going to do what they want to do. And they don't care what you say. So they basically stop following the sort of like party line in the body, and they start reproducing. And they can reproduce so much that they can take over all of they can eat all of the food and nutrients and absorb all the resources. They can obstruct the process in your body and cause you to get very sick and even die. Some cancers never get that big, but the ones we care about are the ones that kill us are the ones that can basically take over your body, and they don't listen to anything, so you have to kill them.
Wow, that's crazy.
And every different kind of cell in your body has a slightly different way of getting cancer. So you can't just cure cancer overall. You got to understand almost every separate case that appears right now.
Wow. So cancer has its own use case per area.
That's right. If you get pancreatic cancer, it's very different from getting skin cancer, from getting stomach cancer. That's a more conventional place for biology to be. I guess what's really exciting for me is that we got to sort of see biology step outside of healthcare, because healthcare is so heavily regulated. It can take, if you start a company or have a new idea about cancer or some healthcare thing, it can take 20 years before that product actually helps a single patient, or 10 or 12, and you won't really make money for that 20 years. So what's really exciting to me is to work with companies that they can get an idea out there and they can be selling product within a couple of years, because they're not in healthcare. They're in food, or they're in fashion, or something like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that was like, usually when you hear people were anti, getting like the vaccine and stuff like that, usually their pushback is always about, it hasn't been tested long enough and things like that. These are usually the typical rebuttals. But from my understanding, this technology has already existed for a while. It just wasn't utilized.
It's been around since the 60s. So,
right?
50 years is not enough for you. Then maybe we haven't messed with it enough. But, in one way, shape, or form, biotechnology is in every aisle of the grocery store. Human consumables like toothpaste, laundry detergent, and food, those are all actually they're taking advantage of biotechnology as we speak. All these new startups are sort of doing it at a different level in a more exhaustive way, but it's touched everything that we do. This stuff has been around so long.
Yeah, that's interesting. But it's just always funny because a lot of people say, oh, they'll be anti. I don't want to get this shot because of this and this. I'm like, do you even understand how antibodies even work? Do you even understand what the shot does? And do you understand the technology has been out for a really long time? So it's not like it just like popped out of nowhere. They're not just like,
And you know what? The thing about it is a lot of the companies are just afraid to tell the consumers about change. But that change is old and it's been there for quite a while. And I think that's a huge failure of the scientists and the technology people to communicate. We have done tremendous amounts of good with this kind of technology. One of them is like, I don't know if you remember, like you might remember from when you were a little kid, but back in the old days when you bought laundry detergent, it was a box that was maybe the size of a 5-gallon gas can. It was huge. And you'd get a full cup measure and you'd put like 3/4 of a cup of powder into every load of laundry because it was just soap. And you need a lot of soap to keep those clothes clean. Now you take that same load of laundry and you've got this little gel packet that's the size of a tablespoon. You throw it in there. And you don't even think about like, oh, that little thing's cleaning all those clothes. How's it doing that? It's all been, every molecule in that laundry detergent packet has been researched up the wazoo to make sure it does the most for you. And that's why it's so much less junk we're putting in the laundry now.
Right. It's about efficiency now. So it's always been it, but yeah.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of that is actually, little proteins called enzymes that go in there instead of, it used to be if you had a new sport coat or something and you cut yourself and you bled on it or you got red wine spill on it, that was pretty much it. Like it was not going to come out, time to throw it away, or maybe you can hide it or something or bleach it out, but it's never going to really be the same. Now there's these enzymes, these proteins in the laundry detergent that go into the laundry and they go right into the jacket and they bleach the red color of the wine out. They break up the proteins that are stained in the blood and it's perfectly clean. Clothes last longer. They look better the whole time and they do it with less material. And used to be laundry detergent was a huge problem with clean water. It would cause all kinds of ecological problems. It would actually cause algae in lakes and things like that. And all the fish were dying in the 70s. And so President Nixon actually signed the Clean Water Act. And that basically made laundry detergents change their formulation. And ever since then, we've had much more eco stability in our household sort of like waste. Because we don't put a bunch of like fertilizer in the form of detergent back out into the world. So it's been really helpful to us keeping our streams clean and our clothes clean.
Wow. Yeah. What do you think? Like coming from somebody who has a biological background in biology, it's like, where do you think the fear, this fear that a lot of humans or people now have of biology and science
that's a great question. We all fear the unknown, don't we?
Yeah.
Like a lot of people are afraid that there's some political shenanigans going on in the system. It's really corrupt. I don't think it is. I think it may be poorly coordinated and doesn't understand people. And it's screwed up in lots of ways because it's so disorganized. We have these two different opinions, right? But once you start digging into how things work, a lot of people find it really kind of, it's just like going into a dark basement. Even though it's in your house, it's a little kind of intimidating. I don't like to go down there. I think that little bit of discomfort is tough for a lot of people. And hey, I just work my job. I come home and why should I have to learn about biotechnology? I took this job so I don't have to learn about chemistry and biology. You know what I mean? See, that's most people's lives. So I think that's one thing is that we have to sort of people are encountering this discomfort of going to an unfamiliar place. And technology, like even with the internet, we love the phones and the browsers, but everybody's uncomfortable with our privacy and so forth. Technology can change things for the good, but it also sort of like puts new rules out there, and that's like uncomfortable for everybody. Totally get that, But the other thing that has changed is that a lot of biotechnology work was done. People didn't want to tell the consumers about it. The public never heard about it, and it was not really designed to help the consumer directly. And so when someone's changing something and it doesn't help you, and the natural assumption to go for is like this is not a good thing, right? It's like typical example is Roundup Ready soy, right? GMO soy. Everybody's afraid to eat GMO soy. It's been tested safe time after time and time. It doesn't really cause any human health problems, but the main reason GMO soy exists is so that it's got this enzyme in it that you put Roundup on it, it's a herbicide. They can weed the whole field. All the weeds disappear instantly, and the soy plants are untouched. Doesn't affect them at all. That's a huge advantage to the farmer. It makes it cheaper to grow the soybeans and get them. And so the cost of raising soy dropped a lot. That doesn't help. But at home, the consumer doesn't buy soybeans. You know what I mean? Like they don't see that. It's just like there's something different in here and it's good. Like that's not the message people want to hear. So this latest, I think this next generation is going to see technology that is there to really change your life and to make it better. And then I think people will enjoy technology just the way you might enjoy buying a Tesla. Hey, it's an electric vehicle. It's different, but it's lux. It's lux. Everybody's going to look at me and say, hey, you got this brand new car. It's really great. It does all these new things. That's the kind of thing. That's the kind of product people need to get a better relationship with technology.
Right. You think it should be more sexy per se, right?
Yeah, it's got to make me look good.
Right.
Right. If I buy a product and it's sort of like, hey, this really helped the global supply chain in delivering this soy to me, like that's not a conversation anybody wants to have. You're not going to go bragging to your friends at the office like, hey, I just ate this GMO soy because it's cheaper to produce. Like, but if it tastes different, if it makes like this great experience, right? If people go and eat things all the time and talk about it all the time, technology should make things that are like Instagram worthy and sort of like bragging points. Then I think we'll see that technology can really be used in a useful way. And I like working with those companies.
Wow. It's like Valdun Sassoon, I think that old 80s commercial was. If you don't look good, we don't look good kind of thing. This needs to happen.
It's the number one rule of having a product, isn't it? I mean, you sign product, like nobody wants to write about a product that's got a bunch of hidden stuff in it that we can't tell you about, and it does something cool, but it just maybe not such an interesting story to you. Like that's a very hard sell, right? It just. And the example I actually stood up in front of a bunch of anti-GMO activists at a panel discussion. I told this story, and I actually won a couple of them over. It's just like it just depends on the context, right? Like, if you go to the doctor and you discover that you have diabetes, and the doctor says you're going to die, but here's some insulin, you will take GMO heavily engineered protein that's been redesigned by a bunch of biotechnology scientists, and you will shoot it straight up into your arm, because it works. It will save your life, right? And people really don't argue with that because it's very clear what it's doing for you. But it is the GMO insulin that we're using, the main line of defense in the insulin world against diabetes is heavily, it's the most advanced biotech almost that we make. And it's used by millions of people a day, right? And nobody ever suffers from it, really. They would die without it, right? That's not an argument that people have. But people sort of say like, oh, there's some GMO protein in my food. I feel it's adulterated. I feel it will hurt me. That's such a different context.
Yeah, that's deep. So basically, what you're saying is GMOs aren't that bad for you as they claim to be, in some sense, or is that what we're saying?
I'm going to
Iterate
approach
that?
an unpleasant topic. So what? But I hate to break it to you, but pretty much every time you have expensive European cheese, you're eating what would normally be called a GMO product, because cheese is, well, I could wax poetic about cheese for quite a while, but cheese is this. I mean, it's this wonderful thing. If you're a big fan like me, there's so many different varieties of cheese. How you make cheese is there's two ways to make cheese. You can throw lemon juice or some acid in with milk, and you'll get the cheese curds down there. Feta cheese and some of these dry white cheeses are made that way. But the best cheeses are made by using an enzyme, and the enzyme actually is available from the gut of a farm animal. Actually, we all have this bacteria in our guts, goats and pigs and sheep and cattle and humans. Anybody that drinks milk has a bacterium in our gut that produces this little enzyme, and the enzyme makes just one little cut in the milk protein. And when it does that, it makes curdles. That's where the cheese comes from. Right. So a curdle is, I don't know if you ever seen, most people never seen cheese made. It's just a great experience, but you put this enzyme in there and slowly gets dissolved, and you see these big round lumps appear in the milk because the protein there actually is designed to turn into a solid when it's in your gut. So when your baby, an infant, drinks or eats the milk and the enzymes in its gut get in touch with it, the protein sinks right to the surface of the gut and stays there. So it's super nutritious, right? This, like you say, it's like almost this design of milk, how it works. And so this enzyme is called chymosin, and people used to, only get it in the place they could get it, which was from the intestines of an animal. And so if you want to make cheese, what they used to do is take a length of some animal's intestines, get a razor blade, open the whole thing up, scrape the lining of the intestines, and throw it into the milk. That's how you get chymosin. Just think about that. Yum. So I was actually talking about this in the 70s. Even the Europeans, they just normally this would be called GMO in Europe because they have the strongest restrictions against GMO in the world is Europe. But they sort of made one exception to the GMO. There's a GMO ban in Europe, but there's one exception, and that is it's called vegan rennet, which is basically they took the enzyme for chymosin and they put it in a bacterium and they produce. So this is GMO. They put that gene in the bacterium, and the bacterium then produced the chymosin, and they just separate it. Then they just have just the pure enzyme, and they throw that in the cheese. It behaves the same way, except you don't have to scrape the proto sewage out of a lining of an intestine, and then treat it and then use it as rennet. And most people prefer that, right? No, but I really heard anybody say that's horrible. There's been technology in cheese for 50 years. I'm going to stop eating European cheese. I haven't seen a single person do that. But we've been eating it for half a century now.
Wow, that is deep. I mean,
it's so good.
Yeah, it is. Right. Cheese is good. Cheese is great.
And there's no sewage in it, which really helps me. I like that. I like that. They don't have a no GMO badge, but they don't have a no sewage badge. They should probably put that up there.
Wow.
So that's called an attractive product. That's called an advantage. It's you don't have to eat any goat poop along with your cheese. So.
Yeah, Rod. I mean, I think I have another question. What is herd immunity to you? Because you see people. Oh my gosh! You see people saying all this stuff. Here. People are like herd immunity and things like that. It's like what does that mean?
So yeah, I'm herd immunity is this. Herd immunity is when there's so many people, there's so many individuals in a population that are immune to something that a few unimmunized individuals are pretty much protected. It's just sort of it's like having bodyguards, in your entourage. If you're surrounded by enough bodyguards, the paparazzi just can't get through. You know what I mean? you can still get unlucky, but there are so many immunized people that the chances are that they'll never, the virus just simply won't get through. That is what we've been trying to achieve with immunization for the past 2 years. Just trying to get enough people immunized so that on the average, someone walks into the country with COVID, they just simply won't infect anybody because they won't meet anybody who's vulnerable, right? But herd immunity starts somewhere around the 80%. Like almost everybody's got to be immune to achieve herd immunity. And then the last remaining people don't have to be immunized. But it's really kind of like not very civic spirited. So like, I'm just going to wait and be one of those last 20% because in this country, well over 30 to 40% people were waiting to be in that top 20%. Meanwhile, we didn't have herd immunity and 1 million people died. So I would call that a downside. You cannot, the herd immunity, the people who remain unimmunized, they kind of pick themselves. Volunteering for that, it's like just a way of slowing down the community immunity that we need to make the virus go away. I mean, if we'd all got immunized that first year, we would have taken the mask off a year ago. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think now we've gotten kind of stylish with the mask, so some people are loving it, and sometimes I like walking out and not having to show my face all the time.
Asia, I love it. I mean, when I go to Asia, everybody's wearing masks all the time. I'm on masks forever now. Whenever I go in public, I'll wear a mask most of the time now. It's better because there's always another virus coming along. Just get less flu would be great.
Yeah, I feel like we're this Bill Gates type of like of a conversation where it's like, hey, we don't know when the next one's going to come out, and it's like
Tavares. I have seen so many things. There's so much biology out there. I mean, there are lots of reasons that we expect to see these pandemics coming over and over and over again. They're like waves of the sea, and the waves are getting stronger and they're getting closer together.
Why?
Well, I think the number one reason, I'm not really an epidemiologist, but just off the top of my head, I would say the number one reason is air travel. If somebody gets sick in Shanghai, that same day, someone in Europe could have that virus. The same day. And there's so many flights and so many people traveling. It is impossible to geographically isolate a disease. By the time you have enough people exhibiting a disease like COVID, and the health authorities see it, it's probably too late because global travel is so frequent. So many people engage in it. So that's one thing. Another thing is that people are going, there's so many people, we're going everywhere. I mean, I'm going to stick to the party line. I truly believe COVID came from bats. Probably someone had to go deep into some nasty cave somewhere in China, pick some bats, thinking, tasty, and they bring them to the market and the bats are hanging out there, not where they should be. And they're just like coughing their little bat cough, and the virus is all over the shop. Once the virus gets out of the bat's little lungs, could go to anything and then comes to us. People are literally scouring every stupid cave on earth, looking to dig up every virus that could cause a pandemic, and we're finding them more often. Those are the two biggest things. Like, we are just everywhere now. There's just used to be like, oh, a disease in Africa, that'll take years to get here. It's all well contained. Like, that's, daily flights.
Yeah,
from Nigeria to Europe. I mean, not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we're traveling more. Globalization has kicked in, so it's like, yeah, how do you stay in one area? Yeah, it's
people don't want to give up air travel, but
no, we don't.
There's a cost to be paid. That's what it is.
See, but this is where biology is going to help out in the future.
Well, if we can use it,
we can do it.
We want to make biology more friendly,
right? I just think it's more. I think more positively that eventually we'll figure out how to get rid of most of these types of viruses and stuff like that. So I'd like to see a future where that exists.
I hope so. That's not what the statistics say. It just depends on how many viruses out there are to be had. But I think
Is it because of the mutations? Is what you're saying the reason why?
Well, I mean, all the serious diseases of viruses come because the virus is sitting in some other animal, and it just when it lands in a human body, it's not well controlled. It's really designed. It's sort of adapted to work in the animal it came from, and so it gets in humans and it can run crazy and kill you. It's just not. That's not what viruses do. Viruses like to reproduce. They don't like to kill their hosts. But, if it's in a new environment, the virus may not behave well and people get sick and die. There's a lot of viruses out there. And so I don't think that we're going to run out of diseases anytime soon, unfortunately.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that being said, you didn't answer my other question. What's your favorite? What's your favorite meat? What is your favorite, your favorite type of meat that is synthetic?
Oh, well,
that you like?
My favorite kind of meat is my favorite kind of synthetic meat, because the best synthetic meats, I would just call them lab-grown meats or.
But do you have a brand preference?
I don't.
That tastes the best?
I haven't, because you know what? The brands have not actually produced product yet. There's only one, I believe there's only one company that has sold the lab-grown meat to the public, and they do that at a loss because it's so expensive to make right now. And so some people have eaten that, so chicken nugget. But I think what's going to be popular is red meat. You get a good steak, and it's made out of beef, and it's produced without all the environmental overhead. I think that's going to be a very popular product because people love beef or lamb, and I think that's my favorite meat too.
But why is it bad for you in one scenario versus another scenario where we synthetically process it?
Well, so this is the basic deal, is that it's not really the kind of animal, it's just how long the animal lives. So if you got a pound of steak or a pound of beef, that the animal that made that steak or beef, it lives 2 to 3 years. Every day it ate and it drank. And so they say that a pound of beef, it takes about 1,500 liters of water, I think, maybe 1,500 gallons. I think it's 1,500 gallons of water to make that one steak, because the cow, the steer or cow had to drink every day. And so it's really using that just to live, and very little of it's going to make the meat, but it takes that long. The chicken lives about 3 months or so, and so it's not eating and drinking nearly as much. But every day these animals are alive. They're pooping and they're burping and they're producing a lot of methane. And methane is like 80 times more powerful greenhouse gas than CO2. So because what you got is every time you pick up a steak, you're actually talking about environmental penalty that goes for 2 years. That's why beef is so environmentally expensive. But lab-grown meat, or cultured meat, as they say it now, it can be formed in about 3 weeks. So the environmental cost is basically proportional to the length of time. Roughly, it's like 1%.
Right, it's more scalable.
2% of the time.
And how much is it? And like, how much does it take to create this? Like, what do you have to do to create all this? Like,
well,
do you feed it fucking water or like what? What happens?
You get the cells, and you pull them away from the animal. We've learned how to culture meat cells separate from the animal, and so we just sort of grow them up in our bioreactors that way. And what's really great about this technology is it relies on about almost 100 years of work that's been done on cell growth. So the biomedical technology understands this, how to grow these cells extremely well. And so, the global talent around there being able to produce this is just advancing super fast. And so, you basically just need to feed the cells the kind of nutrients that they normally like, which are pretty much sugar and a little bit of salt and some minerals, some vitamins, and the cells can take that and grow into bigger cells.
Wow.
So, and they don't create sewage, right? There's waste, but it's pretty innocuous. You can just dump it in the water system, and it's very easily treated, compared to cow sewage. Right?
Wait, so cells are eating. They're consuming food, of some sense, sugar.
All of our cells are in our body. They're just using blood, which is like what they prefer to get. There's oxygen in there. There's sugar in there, but there's no, you eat a bologna sandwich, there's not going to be little pieces of bologna in there. It's all processed down to its basic nutritional sort of like, chemicals. And we can get those chemicals straight off from all kinds of places in the food system. And yeah, they're pretty cheap.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me. It almost feels like in a way where it's like, I don't know, I start thinking like, hey, it seems like life's inside of other lives and so on and so on and so on. And it's like, and I start thinking, I'm like, man, are we just like a fucking cell of some big organism that we just can't scale, right? Something we can't fathom. Are we like a cell in something else?
We are. Well, we're, there's
what we call a galaxy.
Hive mind, there's our social, the social milieu is kind of like a collective entity, really. There's some crazy science out there that talks about some of my favorite stuff is not biology.
Really? What is that?
Psychology.
What's that?
Well, there's this, one of my favorite books is, what's it called? The Wisdom of Crowds.
Okay.
And there was this experiment done by this guy named Francis Galton, like in the 19th century. And Galton thought that he was an elitist, and he thought that the regular people were not very bright and that they really weren't worth much. And so he was at county fair, and they're having a raffle where they had this prize steer, and they said, guess the weight of this animal. The one who's closest will get a prize. And Galton saw this and said, aha, a chance to show how really bad the regular people are, the uneducated, unwashed people. He said, these guesses are going to be miserable because most of these people are country bumpkins. Ha, ha, ha. So he actually talked the guy into giving him the slips of all the guesses. And instead of seeing what he thought was going to, which was a bunch of crappy guesses and one person getting close but not that close, he actually looked at every number on the slip and he got the average. If he averaged the guesses, it was half a pound off the weight of the steer. Wow. It was incredibly close. And he was completely flabbergasted. And he published it in a journal called Nature, it was still one of the most prestigious journals in the world. And, it's just sort of like it's this mysterious thing that people find that if you have a lot of people looking at something, somehow they average out and actually guess pretty well, even if they're not super educated about what it is they're guessing. If they are educated, the chances they'll give a good guess are even better. And that's mysterious. Like nobody knows how exactly that works. But there's been a lot of people who want to try to use that. I mean, that's a little bit about internet AI. People want to utilize that wisdom of crowd for all kinds of things. It's just amazing. But it works over and over again. Typical examples in a classroom is you have a jar of jelly beans, and nobody can tell how many there are there. Like my mind boggles. You can't count them. And so they just ask the students to do that. Without a doubt, if you got like the more students you have, the closer the average is going to be to the number of actual jelly beans in the jar. Even though, like, I look at a jar of jelly beans and I'm like, I just could not. Is it 1,000? Is it 500? I cannot even guess, right?
That's bananas. Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Well, the great thing about science is there's always something else worth looking at. Nobody understands. I mean, the fun never ends.
The fun never ends.
Yeah, it's too bad that I hope that everybody listening will sort of like get engaged in that, because that's what's really great is just like being unexplored territory.
Yeah, asking those questions, asking those 5 whys and 25 whys, I mean, that's kind of where it is. But let me ask you some other stuff. Mm-hmm. What other things that, because we were talking a little bit offline and, you brought up that, you've had about 5 lives within your life of careers that you've been interested in and things like that. And you said you were interested in some things earlier on. What were some of those things? And
I think for me, now that I left my regular scientist role, I just find that the greatest fun I can have is to wonder, where am I going to go next? What am I going to be next? Because all this environment where on startups and so forth changes so quickly. Used to be a lot of insecurity for me to sort of think like, I can't have this job in 3 years. I got to have another job. What's it going to be? But now I'm kind of surfing it. And I kind of love just sort of surfing that, trying to figure out where am I going to be in 3 years. And I'll just sort of at some point I'll just prepare to write off what I'm doing now and I'll move on to something else. So I was working as a venture capital investor for 4 years. Decided the best thing to do was to co-found a startup. We knew all this venture capital, went out and raised money. It was not a problem. Raised $15 million for Wild Earth. It was a revolutionary dog food company. You can still they're still going. They can buy the food now. But we stopped doing R&D. And so I moved on, and I was like, what am I going to do now? Well, I'm just going to go. I love working with startups and people doing something exciting, helping making it real. And so I've been doing that now for 2.5 years. I know I'm going to have to change again, but it's been a great run. I mean, I've been, I think, very successful. There's nothing like encountering the unknown with like someone who's really, really, really stoked about it. That's the one consistent thread I get that I love.
But you're also talking about that you were also interested in other things like film and things like that. Like,
I see. My early career.
Let's dig into it.
I've always kind of been like that. Like some people you can sort of spot them in college. Like they just really can't focus on anything, and they're always like running after one idea or another, and just super excited about something they just heard about. That was me all over the place. As an undergraduate, I thought I was going to do video. We were talking about your studio setup here. I've built studios like this. I love it. I chose science instead. Science was even more unknown and more mysterious. No one in my family does science. I was the first one. I slowly become more and more what I call a jumper. I'm like, as soon as I see some better place to go, I just get prepared to jump. I love that. And it's just a great life. It's a life that I could not have imagined for myself even 7 or 8 years ago. But I'm if I come back in a couple of years, I'll be talking about something completely else. I'm pretty sure. There's no there's no end of crazy things to do, fascinating things to get involved in.
What else are you interested in? I mean, you said, maybe in a while or a couple of years, you never know. Like, what other things are, what spikes your interest?
I'm going to get back to the biology here because, meat and animal products is something that definitely has caught people's imagination. And there's been billions of dollars invested in the past couple of years. And it's really starting to take hold. We're really starting to see momentum behind those products and it changing people's lives and finally getting to the volume where it's going to help the environment. I think we're going to see that next year or two. But, as I was saying, like, as McKinsey saw and we saw, I think what's going to happen is more and more waves of these technologies are going to come out. They're going to start touching human beings in a fascinating way. Like, for instance, right now, I can see a second strong wave in fashion and beauty, right? So one of the investments we made, and some friends of mine called MycoWorks, they learned how to make a leather out of mushrooms. They grow this mushroom and it grows all these little fibers called mycelium, and they learn to make the fibers and turn them into leather. And they feel just like organic animal leather. If you take a vegan leather, which is made out of plastic, you touch it, it's cold. You can tell it's plastic. Your fingers know. But when you touch their stuff, Phil Ross is the technical officer there. He's basically the founder. He loves funguses. He's been a fine artist working with living things all of his life. And he is just absolutely uncompromising. When he makes a piece of leather, it's just so natural feeling. It's just a really convincing product. He and his team are building a factory. They're going to start chugging this stuff out. And, it's just one more animal source that we're not going to have to deal with. But being able to make leather like that means that we'll be able to do all kinds of crazy things that we couldn't otherwise do, because leather is kind of expensive and it's kind of difficult to deal with. And when you skin an animal, sometimes the cut doesn't come out the way you want. These guys can just produce this. It's just like, it's an amazing future with them. And fashion is very interesting because most clothing is not recyclable. It has to go to landfill. And so we want to create the sustainable, biodegradable materials made out of biology, less chemicals. Everybody wants that for the fashion. So there's a great hunger for it right now. Seeing lots of innovations.
Wow, that's interesting. So, like, what do you think? Like, I mean, like right now, there's like this financial crisis, if you will, right? Mm-hmm. of inflation. Like, what do you think like when you're looking at startups and you're looking at investments and things like that, what would you say to a lot of the startups and founders now when they're trying to raise capital?
Yeah. Okay. That is a topic I like to call how to kill it. So this is what I do. I like to engage in founders and help them get over these problems, right? The number one piece of advice is that you got to remember that you really want to let yourself be exceptional. I think a lot of people say, I want to be an entrepreneur. And they're like afraid. We're all afraid when we try something new. There's nothing wrong with that. But that comes out and they sort of say like, I'm going to be like Uber, but we're going to just only do golf carts. Like a lot of people come out with an idea you've heard before and they just make it a little smaller to make it sound more possible. That's not what the investors want to hear. What we want to hear is, what do you have that's completely different? Do you have something that you've seen that will change the world? Much rather talk to somebody who's ready to change the world and doesn't know how to do it than someone who is not going to change any damn thing. and is free to admit that. It's much more likely that latter person will be able to build that business. But is it a business that we really need? I think the thing about startups is that people forget that we're here to do something special. And so if you let yourself be exceptional, be different, let yourself be exposed like that, that's just something people love. And it's just one of those rare places where just being yourself is like the best you can be. People don't take advantage of that. It's a problem. It's too bad, I think, people are hiding their light under a bushel a lot, and just you don't want to do that. That's one of the big things.
Wow, so you're basically saying that if you're a founder, you should be out there, taking big risks. You should be building things that you feel fit within your scope of leveling, well, not really leveling the playing field, but pushing things further. Not really doing things that are minute or just have like one small feature set into it's like LinkedIn plus, a dating site, it's like you're saying something that's pushing the curve.
That's right. I mean, people make jokes about pitches like that. It's like Uber, but for pets, like people really want to, there are a lot of pitches like that. Those are the insane pitches nobody really wants to hear. I have to tell you, but a new idea that's really original, that's rare. And it sticks out like a sore thumb, and it brings attention and talent and resources to you to get it done. If you really let yourself be as special as possible, then you have a shot at doing something really amazing. But don't be less amazing than you could be.
But, I wanted to, touch on this. At what point, what makes something that's revolutionary? When you look at some of these startups, for example, now were originally startups, but now are these public companies like Netflix, for example. How far were they pushing the curve when you were just saying, this is Blockbuster, but for online?
Well, I think there's another thing, and I think you and I talked about this a little too, as someone who develops product, we've both seen this. There's another thing too, is that you also have to try something to get it go. To see if it has anything in it. You can't just stand back at a long distance and say, Uber for pets, that sounds good, or it sounds bad. You kind of have to try it. What I've seen time after time after time is people say, I really want to be here. I really want to do this. I have this basic idea. I will sit with someone for 6 months trying to find what's special about an idea like that. Because you have to sometimes find markets that you didn't know existed that are desperate to talk to you, right? And so if you have a real advantage, you can turn that into one of these into big ambitions. But I like to just sort of sit with people through that. And that's kind of one of my specialties, is seeing something more deeply in what someone is proposing than they see. Because I know a lot of different markets, and I've seen these transformations. And that exploration is a form of discovery. That's just thrilling, right? It's like discovering a new planet. It's like science. It's like, oh my gosh, this is really good business. That's an amazing thing to see.
Wow. That's pretty interesting. Yeah. I kind of like, when I think about startups, it's a wild journey, because you think about a lot of people, they will be raising, capital from they'll attempt to raise capital from numerous of investors, but may not land anything until they get to like 100. Right. And then it's like, oh, this one investor said, okay. And then eventually they scaled and they might have made it. But then there's a lot that don't ever make it. And there's a lot that raise money that don't make it. I mean, you have like Elizabeth Holmes and things like that with Theranos and, you know.
Well, you know, I mean, I realize Elizabeth Holmes had a lot of problems.
Now.
And mistakes were made. Maybe she should have tried a different way. But, you know, I mean, I'll give her credit for one thing. She had a basic idea that would have changed everything. And it was a great idea. She just could not make it happen. So you go back to that 19-year-old Elizabeth Holmes started raising funds. I do want to be around Elizabeth Holmes at that age. When she started to lie and she couldn't sort of make it happen and she sort of took the easy route and sort of try to copy your way into a machine, then I wouldn't want to be around that. You know what I mean? Like you have to make the right choices. But if you have this fantastic idea and you make the right choices, it really is amazing. And that's an experience worth having. And I don't want to knock her for trying.
Yeah.
She probably went too far in terms of her pursuit. She went the wrong path. But I work with people all the time and I try to get them to choose the right path. And it's usually the hard path. I got to say, it's like, oh, you know, we're going to have to take a couple of years to sort this out. You know, the investors will be patient with us because it's worth having. You've got a great idea. People will be patient with you. If you got a kind of mediocre idea, people say like, hey, this isn't a big deal. Where is it? You know, they won't give you the extra time. And so I still admire her for her ambition. I just don't approve of her choices. You know, like, you know, I want to say that, you know, I mean, like there's some good things that she did. They're in the past, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it was her execution. I mean, when you think about how she did things, I think was where, you know, the choice went for. She
made some choices. We're not gonna look to our employees to solve this problem. Nobody can seem to quite make this work. I'm too busy to actually make this happen. I'm not the leadership is not technical enough to get into the weeds on that. There were a lot of things I would have done obviously quite differently if I were in her position. I think I know several companies that are actually trying to make it work. I believe somewhere out there will be someone who can launch diagnostics with a couple drops of blood, or something like that. In fact, I'm working with a company that's not using that kind of technology to do some remarkable things with blood. It's too bad if she's causing a slowdown on that, if Theranos causes a slowdown on that, but it's going to happen. Someday, somebody, maybe someone just listening to the podcast, will produce a product that will do everything Theranos said, and it will just be a ghostly memory, right? It's definitely possible to produce that product. Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes were just not the people who are going to do it. But the idea is not dead. And that's what's really exciting. You know, it's like, hey, a lot of people have gone down that path and they haven't come back. But that doesn't mean we're not. I just love that sense of adventure because it's worth having. It's just that you just have to you just have to do it the right way.
Yeah, that's interesting. And when you look at, like, I don't know, that there's so many different ways to, you know, disrupt things. And, you know, one thing that I think that, you know, we've been searching for, or humankind has been searching for, is that fountain of youth. When we start talking about genetics and biology.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, we have things like NAD that exists now. And, you know, some people who are able to understand it or take advantage of it are taking it to extend life or to slow down the process.
Right.
Like, what do you think? Like, where do you see us with that, you know, that process? And what's your opinion?
The baby boomers are rich and they're not going to want to die. And that's turned into a major sector of investment. There's a lot of people who are interested in life extension and looking at long-term health. I think it's a great place to put your money. There are some amazing things that are happening. We have a lot to learn. But I think that's a great problem for private capital to take on, because you can't actually work on that problem with an NIH grant for the most part. The feds don't fund so much of that research. What we find is, I think the 21st century is going to be We get some great scientists in academia. They have a new idea. They prove something. And then private capital is going to run in there and make it happen in a short period of time. That's how we're going to see these products come to light. I think that you and I are going to live an extra 10 to 20 years longer because of that. Just my guess.
Yeah, 10 to 20 years longer. Ooh.
What are you gonna do with that time?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully figure out some stuff earlier.
Hopefully not just binging Netflix.
Yeah.
I gotta start my own podcast.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just always interesting to me because when you think about so many different like sharks and stuff like that and turtles, they live so much longer than us.
Sharks don't get cancer either.
That's even wilder.
You can feed them carcinogens; they don't get cancer. It's
Why is that?
No, some people have theories. I haven't read through that. I looked at a couple articles. But it's that people love looking at some of the animals that don't get cancer and wondering why. It's hard to believe that something with that many cells won't get cancer. But I'm not sure.
That's interesting. I was reading one book that was written by one doctor for around 40 years, and he was saying there was hidden reasons of how we do certain things or how we think can help increase certain diseases. Like self-hate and things like that can increase and depression can cause things that he saw. He basically said that he saw a pattern that people who had self-hate or who had depression typically had cancers.
Yeah. You know what the biggest obstacle I think the biggest obstacle that people just don't talk about to a long life and good health is just simply our need to resist everything. It's really us. We stand in our own way so much. If you look at all the recommendations for good health, almost anybody could live longer, be healthier, be happier. But we just can't do it for the most part. We get more obese every year, and our blood pressure goes up. And I've been on this health kick for the last couple of years, and just reading the literature and just doing what they tell me and trying some new things on my own. It just goes along with the rest of my lifestyle. I'm just so much healthier than I've ever been. Even when I was in my 20s, I was not this healthy that I am. Just keep digging and trying things, and you do what works for you. You'll be surprised, I think.
But why do you think that we don't take care of ourselves? Why don't we care about ourselves? It seems like, when you look back in history, a lot of people prior seemed to be a little bit more healthy. Was it because they were hunters and gatherers, or what was the difference between us? It seems like we don't take care of ourselves.
Probably it was that. Probably there's a big social factor in that everybody in a medieval village has to work, and I'm sure that helped a lot. It also probably helped that they were starving a little bit, because eating less food is the one thing that's very common to all longevity research. The less the cells have to take in, the healthier they are. And so starving yourself a little bit is really a great way to live healthier and longer. There's another thing too, is that is this exceptional. I'm going to go back to this. Let yourself be exceptional. Today, the way society is now, we have so much freedom and we don't take it. We kind of let ourselves migrate to the mean. I'm not overweight for average, male my age. Yeah, but the average male your age is getting fatter. It's but I'm still underneath the average. That's just an excuse. And so if you believe your own excuses, I think that's the biggest problem that you may have. You just have to turn all that off and just look in the mirror and say, am I happy with this? Is this what I want? Or do I want to do better? And then being able to say, yeah, I want to do better, and I'm going to grab that. Those are three things that most people do not do.
You're right, 100%. But I feel like
Gary Vee. You know who Gary Vee is.
I know Gary Vee is, of course.
Gary Vee
yeah,
because everybody watches miles and miles.
I've actually met Gary Vee.
You did?
Yeah.
What was it like?
I met him. It was random. It was right after Facebook, the movie came out around that time, and Facebook was going public. And I was on this like Russian roulette type of like platform that he was investing in. It was started by Sean Parker right after the Facebook movie.
How cool.
And I was on it late at night because I was always testing out products. I'm always trying to see the interactions. Like, oh man, what's this? And I was like one of the first couple of users to use it and help it test it. And I was just flipping through it, just seeing who I would actually interact with. And then it's freaking Gary Vee.
Hilarious.
And he's like, kind of like in his underwear or like pajamas or something like that. And he's sitting on his bed. He's like, hey. I know, don't turn. This is not, I know this looks weird. I'm not weird. I'm not a creep. I promise you. I just.
He must be loving this product. I have to introduce myself, tell everybody I'm not a pervert. Like,
yeah. He was just like, he said, I'm just investing in this product and I'm just checking it out late night. It was late. And so I was trying to see how it was going to work. He said, there's really smart people behind this. Sean Parker, I think it's going to do really well, and I'm investing into it. So I'm trying to see like how this works, and do you like it? Like,
he's feeling out the product.
Yeah, he was really into it. I was like, this guy is like
amazing.
On it. And I was like, I don't know who Gary Vee is, but he said, hey, you know what? I'm going to follow you. He said, what's your Twitter? I'm going to follow you on Twitter right now. And sister, all right. So he follows me on Twitter right there.
Wow.
And I'm like, that's freaking awesome. I was like, yeah, thanks, man. I was like,
Twitter
cool.
Career.
But I didn't even know who he was. So I was like, fuck, Gary Vee.
That's
amazing.
amazing.
Gary Vee. And I looked him up later. I was like, oh, the wine guy.
Like he's
now he's huge.
He's a huge entrepreneurial sort of like motivator too. I like watching him sometimes. He has some great advice. But I think what I was thinking of is like he has this one thing he says over and over again. Like he shows up on a panel, he gives a half-hour talk about how to move things forward, how to be a hustler, And usually for a long time he would say at the end, he'd say, "Why do I do this? I do this because hardly anybody's going to take my advice." If everybody sort of like jumped up and sort of started to be like Gary Vee, there'd be so much competition. It'd be hard to be heard. But he knows it's not going to happen. That's how rare it is that people will stand up for themselves. That gets back to a lot of the questions we have here. Like, I'll tell you another story. I was at a party one night, and some of the early product people who were with Square were there. And I said, oh, yeah, tell me a Square story. He's like, what's the most amazing thing that happened to you? He's like, yeah, when we started testing the product for Square, paraphrasing, he said, we thought that people would want to use Square to grow their business and get more revenue. But what they really wanted was they wanted to spend less time with their business. They wanted more downtime. And I'm like, well, that makes no sense to me. I'm just not the kind of person who would do that. It's like, hey, if I can make an extra $100 a month, I'll put the extra 5 minutes in that, because next month it'll be an extra 200. And yeah. But I think that is a much more typical response, and to the extent that we kind of got to get that blockage that I am not exceptional. I don't really want. I don't know. I just like that's not who I want to work with. I recognize a lot of people like that. I have no problem with it, but that's the biggest obstacle to achieving some of these startup goals, though.
So wait, what are you saying? Are you saying more that you felt like their answer wasn't legitimate as much, or the goal wasn't?
Well,
the problem they were trying to solve.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little surprised because what these people are doing is they're talking to small business owners, right? Because those are the Square customers. They're trying to accept payments from credit cards for whatever it is they want, right? And I just think of myself as like being a small business owner is like this invitation to struggle. You're going to make a couple $100 a month, a couple $1,000 a month. I would think you'd want to grow that business to a certain size to have a sense of security. And that size is using employees to achieve at least a couple $100,000 a month in revenue. That's what I consider to be a business where I don't have to pay attention to the business all the time. Like, that would be my goal. But a lot of people are making a lot less money than that, and they just kind of want to. That's what this guy's saying, is like they don't really want that. They kind of want to be where they're at. They just want to work less hard at it, and so that is surprising to me, because it's not how I think. I don't, everybody should do what they want to do. I will make that clear. Like, if that's your bag, that's great. I just had no idea there's so many people with that attitude.
So you mean that you what they basically said is, from their information that they did, or their feedback that they got from their customers was, their primary use case is to solve a problem for time, right? Instead of solving the problem for them to make more money.
To grow.
But isn't that inherently the same or a similar thing? Isn't it a cause and effect? If you have more time, you can have more time to grow, or maybe not. I don't know.
No,
That's
it's more
interesting.
like, I want to take weekends off.
That's what it was about.
Well, I'm just giving you an example. I think a lot of people like to take weekends off, but I know like a lot of people want to run a restaurant, for instance. If you are in the restaurant industry, you may never take a weekend off because that's when everybody comes in. You take Monday, Tuesday off, right? That's fine. Nobody comes in. Nobody goes out to eat on Monday or Tuesday, relatively speaking. Like you got to be there when the business comes in. I think it's fine if people want to do that. But I think what we're seeing now, times like this come along, is inflation and there's all kinds of instability. I think it's good to have a good enough size that you don't have to, that you can sort of weather the storm, and I think, I don't know. I like building things. So I want to build something a little bigger than that. I would think, but it is a personal preference.
Yeah. I think the thing is, probably maybe so many people are burnt out, maybe from their small business that they can't see past,
or maybe they're just happy where they are. And
yeah,
of course,
that's
that
true
is
too.
fine. That is fine. I guess the real thing about the story is this, so like that there was a substantial majority of people. Whereas, you might say, oh, there's some people like that, some people are elsewhere. No, most people are like that. So that's I think getting back to entrepreneurship and startups, like I think if you want to get an investor to come and drop a whole bunch of money in your lap to make your business real, you've got to have some real strong ambitions for that business. And that's who I tend to work with. And I like that attitude, and it charges me up, to be honest. I just like being around that. There's a lot of energy for it. Usually I'm not growing my business too much, but so I just like helping people reach those goals.
Yeah, that's a lot of interesting stuff. I don't know. That's interesting. I feel like we're in this loop of like this time, because you were mentioning, to backtrack a little bit about Gary Vee and his personality trait and the things that you mentioned about him is, I feel like, we're in a time where most people feel like, feedback is bad. So even when you go back and you start talking about weight and things like that, when we're trying to be self-aware of oneself, I feel like the United States that we live in now is all about, anti, self-help in certain ways. It's like, body shaming. If you're over fucking weight, you're overweight. Let's get some gym in there. Cause like, what's going to motivate me to lose weight? Just you telling me, don't body shame me. That's not going to fucking stop me from, gaining weight. I mean, I'm going to sit there and stay myself. I'm going to keep on laying on the fucking couch and chips.
It's like, I'll show you.
Yeah. It's like, you know what? You just said I need to maybe exercise. I go to the doctor. Doctor says you need to lose some weight. Are you body shaming me? I can't believe it. Now I'm going to tweet that out.
That's my hurt feelings. Yeah, no, I think actually, you read most business books, most entrepreneurship books, or even self-help books. Most of them talk about how you need to sort of like not take things too personally. It's now become one of the top things that I see. I've been through 4 or 5 of them last month, and they usually start with that. I guess you just got to be prepared to take good advice. That's a hard one to do just on your own.
Yeah, I just think like now more than ever, it's just like feedback.
More than ever.
More than ever.
Some people are like landing themselves in jail. Like, it's like, no one's going to tell me I can't run into the Capitol building. Like, it's not your building. So it's like, you can't tell me that. Like, there's a lot of, you can't tell me this, you tell me that. And like, I'm like, I like to work with people who are like, tell me what I'm doing wrong. And you get close to people like that. I want to tell you something, like, who are the best friends, Tavares? Who are the best friends?
To me, the best friends I like to lean on are the people who are going to be transparent to me in a healthful way, right? And I'm not saying in a way where it's just like, oh, they're being nice about everything 24/7, but there's a way to articulate things and say, hey man, dude, you're getting a little bit of, you might be
you're in trouble,
losing weight, or you might need to be helped. You might want to stop this, dude, because this is not a good pattern. Hey, you need to quit hanging around this person.
When you're putting head in the wrong direction,
people are going to call you out on your shit. Let's just be clear.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. I mean, I just don't know. Some people actually do prefer them, but I've never heard anybody actually say, I want people to tell me I'm doing good no matter what I'm doing. Like, what is that, right? But when time comes, you have to be the person to thank that person for basically when you criticize your friends, you're basically risking your friendship with them for their own good. And if someone doesn't see it that way, you're just going to have fewer friends. That's why people don't do it. I think you have to really proactively welcome that and seek it out and really value those friends. Not a common approach.
No, I agree with you. I remember I was talking to one of my friends. We had started up a startup a long time ago together, and then he went off to Harvard and became like a little professor and stuff like that. And I was telling him, I was like, hey man, I was like, he was doing public speaking and things like that. And I was like, hey, listen, dude, I said, I'm digging the public speaking. You're getting great at it. Keep on going. I love it. It's awesome. I said, but hey, if you're doing public speaking, man, I said, I would tell you one thing is if you would fix your teeth, it would help you 100%, dude. I'm telling you. He got upset about that. He said,
really?
He got upset about that. And then he was like, but he didn't say it exactly. He said, I don't know if that's appropriate. And I was like, are you serious? I was like, hey man, this is a business move. Like if you work with anybody in the business who's power movers, they're going to tell you exactly what the fuck is going on. They're
bad for him. He's showing his yellow teeth around.
Yeah. It wasn't even about yellow teeth. He had like crowded teeth and they were all very crooked.
Looking a little weird.
And so when you're opening your mouth, people are going to look at your mouth. Like if you're working with anybody who's a person who's going to talk about personal brand and, your look and they're going to be these type of people who are publicists, they're going to tell you
about it. Most of the people I work with, they're like PhD scientists. They've been in graduate school their entire life. And now they have to become a CEO, public face, a thought leader. There's a huge transition. And anybody who looks at that and sort of says, I can just do this by myself. It's super easy. I don't need any help. Like, I don't know what you're talking about, but Godspeed. But, I think it's a big step. And, the transformation can be gigantic, but you have to be at least admit, like, I'm changing, like if you can't admit that, like where you're going to go, I'm just going to be myself.
Yeah, you got to be able to take constructive feedback. It's not like a stab in your heart. It's always about what's being like, is this helpful for me, really? Like you have to be a little bit self-aware, but instead of being defensive, like, oh, I can't believe you said that. I mean, people don't notice.
I was a staff scientist, a PhD staff scientist. You get no public speaking exposure at all in that job. And suddenly I'm working as an investor and I'm being invited to give talks in front of panels. I have no idea how to represent myself. And I've had to learn everything. And I was dying for someone to call me and tell me, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that. I actually ended up having to go out and sort of like do my own work on it. And I understand because people are happy to give advice, but they're afraid that you're going to come back and bite them back, and I get that, I get that. But that means probably you have to do that work yourself, or you have someone like myself to come along and help you. I love helping people with media transitions like that. Had some great success in a couple of cases, but you have to be able to stand up and talk about yourself. No one's going to talk about yourself for you. Who's going to advertise your podcast? It's got to be you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people like hanging around yes people. And I think that is what's contagious. And in our society now, like I said, I feel like it promotes this, these yes people, these people who just give you likes.
It can really bite you in the ass too. Like I think, and have you seen this? Like you've been around publicity photos and like that. What I discovered is a lot of the people, like a lot of photographers, for instance, they're taking my picture, they're using it for publicity for, the accelerator or as an investor or whatever. They're using the photograph for them, but a lot of them don't want to mess with me and tell me like, oh, there's something wrong. So I'll like get the photo back. I'm like, what happened to my hair? It's like there's this big spike going off in this direction. Like, you didn't tell me that my hair needed fixing. Like, they didn't want to get into it with me. So they just leave my hair off in somewhere. Now I go look at the mirror before I get in front of a camera. But you have to do it by yourself. Like, even the photographer won't do that. Crazy world, right?
Because people are afraid. They don't want to piss people off.
Exactly.
I mean, Elon Musk, somebody had to tell him, or he realized himself that his hair was going away and he got it fixed.
He did.
He just didn't say, hey, let me, like that wouldn't, like, how would, like, when you think about it, how would that have impacted his leadership role? You know, him not having hair. I mean, you had Steve Jobs who didn't, but I think it fit him more.
I love that part of the job, actually, is because when I first started being an investor, it was kind of like, this is one of the greatest crucibles for change, is like letting your back go up against the wall. Like, I quit my career as a scientist. I left a comfortable job with a good paycheck. And here I was becoming an investor. I was getting paid decently, but there was it wasn't clear that job was going to be around in another year. Like, we had to be successful or we were going to be out. So we worked super hard. I was sweating every day. What can I learn? What else can I change? How can I make these companies successful? They've got to be successful. Otherwise, I'm done. You know what I mean? But that's just like, is also like a great time to be alive. So that's the secret, is to like, yeah, go ahead. Like, really put something on the table.
Yeah, you gotta put yourself out there, and you gotta put yourself out there open for criticism. And I'm not saying like all criticism, or I don't want to say criticism. I would say feedback. There's a difference between feedback and criticism in a way. But I think there's a thin line between it, and I think people can't really separate which one is which. If somebody's saying, "Okay, screw you," and etc.
Where's the line for you? Let's talk. Let's set the line right now.
You know what? Here's what for me. It's like it depends on how close the person is, or sometimes that matters, or sometimes it doesn't. But sometimes somebody might. It's how it's being said, and I think people take that in different variant ways. But somebody says, "Hey, man, Ron, I love you, bro, but you know what? I don't like polo." I really like Tommy Hilfiger.
I got this little horse on my shirt.
Yeah, but some people might be against polo. They might be like Tommy Hilfiger.
Polarizing.
Yeah,
it's polarizing.
Right, polarizing. But you know what I mean? Like this is how I would start it off with a compliment and then
so that's
lead it
giving
with that.
The advice.
Yes,
but the advice itself. If you're the listener, I have this advice. Right, listen very carefully to every word. If the word If it's telling you that you're broken and there's something wrong about you that you cannot fix, that's an insult. It's hurtful. That's harmful. But if it's talking about you not doing something but that you can change, that is helpful. And people confuse those all the time. Like, you're stupid is just completely unhelpful, right? But it's like, you could learn to slow down and read more clearly. That's not an insult. Anybody can do that, probably, right?
No, I totally agree with you. And this is something I've always thought about too as well. And internally, like when I'm trying to, have self-reflection, I'm like, hey, how can I do this differently? Or how can I do this? And it's like, it is that. And it's totally that. It's like, I would say sometimes to certain people, like, hey, look, this is something you can change. Like, you can go to the gym, you can work out. So this is not like I'm saying something to you that you can't improve. I'm just talking about self-improvement. How can you make yourself better? Right. And
it's okay not to take.
You don't have to listen to it.
Once you start listening to advice, you're going to get so much you can't do it all. And that's okay too. That leaves you the primary task of sorting out what's the most important advice and prioritizing and just taking on those things that you can. But being grateful for all of it doesn't make you less of a person. I think it'll make you some friends. Really.
Yeah, I agree with you. And by the way, I also love this synthetic type of meat or plant-based meat, which is Impossible Burger. I find it to be like it tastes the same. Yeah,
it does. It's really interesting to have a little party and you make a little bit of like Angus beef burger and a little Impossible and a little Beyond. The taste difference is just amazing. Impossible is really great. I like the sausage now. Got the mild sausage. I make it with sausage spaghetti sauce and all kinds of things. It's delicious. Ragu, like sausage ragu. I'm gonna make some for for my kids this
You're
week.
killing me here.
It's great. I got to go by Trader Joe's and get some
I
salad.
know you're making it all out, bro. But you can get Impossible Burger from Target now.
You can get it almost anywhere. I just
haven't found the sausages there though yet. I didn't know they even had those yet.
They have it at Safeway, definitely, and I think I got some at Trader Joe's. I'm not sure about Walmart or whatever, but
I need to
it's all
find
happening.
those because I tried them one time and I was like, man, these taste exactly like regular sauces. Like, what are these?
Yeah, once you put some
couldn't
spice
find
in
it.
there, it starts taking very real, But like I use it for pizzas and sausage sauce and little sausage patties in the morning. And
Yeah, I'm loving the tacos. I've replaced the hamburger meat with the Impossible Burger for the tacos, and I cannot tell the difference.
every
It's
time you
crazy.
do that, you're saving like 1,000 gallons of water or something like that. It's incredible.
I'm also thinking about how I'm saving my health.
Yeah, right. No cholesterol. That's right. And there's all these studies that show that your health does better on plant-based meat than regular meat. Even though it's not the healthiest plant material you could eat lettuce and probably be healthier. It's still substantially better than eating meat. So like, what's the problem?
Right. And I usually like to eat it to complement, lettuce or something like that, like a taco salad or things like that.
That's
It's
right. That's
pretty
right.
awesome.
Yeah, you get your veggies in too. So
Yeah. I'm trying to double dose it.
I'll just tell you this, man. If we cut back 50% of the beef, we would roll back climate change 10%. It would be like 8 years of climate change would be rolled back if we cut our beef consumption in half.
I mean, what do you think about this? Is climate change real? What do you have to say for those who say climate change isn't real? It's fake.
Freaking real. I mean, I just drove down.
This happens all the time.
This is the hottest summer in the Bay Area since I've lived here. In June, it's so hot for June. Usually, when I moved here in 2000, you would get fog in June, and it would be kind of cold, and you really couldn't go downtown San Francisco without a thick coat because the fog might roll in. Just 20 years later, like t-shirts and shorts downtown San Francisco, and the sun's just beating down on us now, and we're getting very high temperatures in June. It used to be that would be late July to get into the 90s, and we're getting that now. You can just see climate change in the Bay Area, but there was it's really going to impact us. Like there was a friend sent me a story that these large herds of cattle are just dying from heat exhaustion in Kansas. That's primarily beef raising counties. And there's just hundreds of them just dying because it's too hot. It went over 100 degrees this last week for several days.
That's bananas.
It is bananas. I just, like if you want to, you can hide at home and sort of say, this isn't happening. But it's, some people it's very real, and, when you can't raise beef in certain parts of the country, it's going to be more expensive. It's going to be harder to get, these are all kind of permanent changes.
Yeah. I think there's also, the thing where it's like thought about where it's, you have like the polar caps, and it's just like at one time, these were grasslands. These places were hot. And it's like now they're cold. And it's like, is there some type of like pattern within Earth to where there's some type of natural, climate change that happens?
There is, but, the temperature change is much faster than any geological record. So there was an ice age and there was a sort of like a swamp age before that for the dinosaurs. But that those would change over millions of years. And what we're seeing is 20 years, we're getting baked pretty bad. Actually, this kind of gets back to the other problem we talked about where people just we could be out there doing all kinds of great things, but we kind of we feel inertia. I think there's a lot of inertia around this kind of thing, because when something's threatens us and makes us change, it's just something that's going to meet a lot of resistance normally, and but I'll tell you, like when I was living in Boston, the cod were starting to get fished out. If you go back to the 90s, you could go to any store and find rows and rows and rows of frozen cod, and it was super cheap. But the fishermen were taking it all out of the water, and it started to run out in the 90s. And the people running the fisheries, the fishermen, they absolutely refused to conserve it all. They didn't want to cut back the catch. They just want to catch whatever they wanted to catch. And the conservationists weren't getting any traction. And then in the end, the fish ran out and people had to sell all their boats. And of course, because everyone was trying to sell a boat at the same time, the boats were worthless. And that caused a huge surge in heroin in the Northeast Maritimes. Like all these fishermen were going to heroin. Like it was in Boston. I was living in Boston at the time, and they were just talking about like, oh, we got to have all kinds of, opioid treatment clinics and stuff like for the unemployed fishermen. And like it was really depressing up there. If we don't look to the future, we're all headed for some sort of like, oh, mea culpa kind of moment. Too late. I mean, they've turned around and have started working with conservationists after that, but pretty extreme place to go before you'll listen, to the future.
Yeah, that's wild. I used to swim at the Cod. Yeah.
Did you really?
Yeah, I used to swim at the Cod. I grew up in Connecticut.
You did?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Stamford, Connecticut. Like? And what was growing up there?
Well, swimming with cod, like they would come up to you?
Well, no, I was swimming, over at Cape Cod, Yeah. Not swimming actually with them, but, I was swimming at Cape Cod, as a kid. I would go summer camp, we would go there. Yeah, St. Luke's camp, yeah.
I mean, even back then, there was just so many, like, giant schools of cod. Now,
Yeah.
Man, it's just like... It's just like to me, it's all around us. So I go to the grocery store, I see it, like there's codfish, but they're not cod. They're just some white fish. They won't tell you what kind of fish they are now. Yeah. That's not the same. Maybe
the aliens are eating all the fish. Maybe that's what's happening. Maybe the aliens are just chowing down on the fish.
When I was a kid, I was eating the fish in fairly large volumes. The aliens can grow their own fish. They don't need us. They have the technology. They're from the future. No, man, I mean, we're all in this kind of position. Like for people who are ready to listen to the future's calling. If you put your ear out there and you listen to that call, there's just all these opportunities open to you. That's the main reason I keep coming back to it, because it's an exciting way to make your life really sparkle. That's just it for me. I mean, I have a lot of anxieties about the future with the environment and so forth, but overall I'm having a great time. It works really great for me.
Awesome. One last solid question I have for you, Ron. It's been awesome so far talking to you. Pretty amazing. The public speaking stuff you've been taking, or you took years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
It's definitely paid off. You know how to do it. You've got it. You know how to hold a stage. Yes, you got it. But to my question, when we talk about, there's this thing like, what's your idea or your opinion about, biology meets machinery? Where do you think the future of that's going to go?
Well, I mean, tech and biotech will be two of the great pillars of civilization. Taking information from biology, processing it, and putting it back into the world is, data's not dead by any means. I think anybody who's doing anything needs to deal with data. And there are very few people who understand both sides. That's a great opportunity for someone who's listening to sort of really be good with both. Because, in machine learning, you get something like, like Facebook data, like all the messages people send and the connections they have. That's typically what machine learning people work on. It's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of synthetic in a way. Biology is, like I say, it's from the alien spaceship. It signals from the alien spaceship. Like nobody really knows what is in biological data. And like, that's just learning to learn how to decode that and use that information. To me, as an explorer and someone who likes adventuring, like I just find that terribly irresistible. You know what I mean? Like, why would I mess with who plays what on Spotify as a data scientist, man? I want to see the electrical signals from the brain and understand whether or not someone is, someone's got a lot of mental stress or anxiety. Like that's like what a way to spend your day.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to, literally yesterday, an investor, Tim Hendricks, came by, ex Tesla, and he, we were talking, and we kind of were getting into the conversation of genetics, and some of the things I was questioning on, and we were having this conversation about was, how much do we know of genetics and its memory, right? Its ability to retain memory from generations. Right? Like how extent do we understand that? Like can DNA to a certain point, have like extended memory from extended relatives in the past, like some behaviors or thoughts, or like how far can that go?
I don't know about conscious thoughts, but it's
well, what about like patterns? Like for example, if certain things were like in the DNA, like
once you have kids, you start realizing there is a lot that gets passed on. Like the way my daughter talks is a lot like her mother. The way my kids eat is a lot like me. All these little mannerisms, you can see, hey, that's genetic after all, But there's 3 ways that information gets passed from one generation to the next. There's the DNA, and it does a lot of mysterious things, and it probably encodes a lot of these mannerisms. But there's also this thing called epigenetics, where the DNA gets labeled with all these little molecules called methyl groups and acetates. And so basically they're like hanging ornaments on the tree. They can be added and removed. So they're temporary memory, but they can be multi-generational. So children, if someone has children during a famine and they're not eating very much, the children will actually carry the marker of that famine, and they'll behave differently, and they'll metabolize food differently, right? So that's, totally fascinating. And there's probably thousands and thousands of things that get passed on like that. So basically, it's like adding a sticky memo to the DNA, and then later on it can get removed, and the next generation won't have it at all.
Right, because it's almost like cookies, almost in a way, what we're doing for computers. Just like having this temporary memory.
It is like a cookie.
We're pushing that on to future generations randomly. There's like genetic recombination where it kicks into another.
It's almost like sticking a note onto the DNA, because the DNA doesn't get like taken apart at all. It just sort of like they just add this little thing to it. And then the third way is that some of the cells actually contain information too when they make the new cells. But that stuff is gone. That won't get passed on to the next generation at all. It will affect the next infant, but then it gets used up. It sort of dissipates after that. So there's all these different. Those are 3 different ways that information gets passed.
Yeah, because you'll take those. You have those genetic websites like 23andMe, Ancestry.com, and they'll try to give you these percentages, and it's just like, you're like, how fucking accurate are these things? Because they can't be.
Sometimes they're pretty accurate. Sometimes they're just taking a stab in the dark. Yeah, it's kind of funny to look at some of those. Some of them aren't right, but some things like where your parents came from on Earth and all those kind of things, they can be startlingly accurate. We're in the early days with genes and genomes. Like, we can't do like the movie Gattaca. We can't just like look at the DNA and make a picture of you, but we will get better. We're just getting started now.
Right. So you're saying like the percentages parts are not probably accurate.
Some of them are very accurate, okay, but a lot of them are not. It's really kind of like hit and miss, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
What causes it to do that? Sample amounts or
sample amount? There are so many traits that people have, like the tendency to get cancer, or whether you like the taste of cilantro or not. Some of them are really well studied, like the cilantro thing.
Neanderthal.
People know exactly. Yeah, Neanderthal. People can identify your parentage if there's a little Neanderthal, and they can find it right away. But what do those genes do? They usually don't have such a strong idea about that. So some of the things like the things that recommend the diet, I think that they're probably still not very, from the DNA, still probably not very accurate. But, like where my parents came from, that's going to be pretty accurate. And so there's this mixture of really well studied things are really well understood, and a bunch of stuff that's like, maybe this happens. Like I have a high red blood cell count. I have a lot of red blood cells in my blood. and I got this test, and they said, well, there's this thing called hyperchromaticism, which is basically a lot of red blood cells. And so there's a gene for that. And they tested it and says, you don't have that hyperchromatic gene, right? But I have very high red blood cell count. I have hyperchromaticism, right? But I don't have it because that's a European gene that European people have, and it creates hyperchromia for them. Like it creates, and so that's just an inaccurate. I'm not, but I am. Like that's a kind of typical result where, hey, that's a gene that's very prominent in European people, and that's not irrelevant to me.
Wow. So it means basically you have a lower white cell blood?
There's a bunch of other. No, I just have I'm pretty regular, except I have, I don't know, 30-40% more red blood cells than most people do. I have a really high red blood cell count.
Yeah, my doctor told me, she's like, she was thinking something similar to you, like, but she was like, your white blood cells are always like lower randomly.
Oh, interesting.
And she said it's like, she thought it was like a problem. She was like, I think it's just like genetically you.
Yep.
And but she was always checking. She was like, oh my God, what is this going?
So yeah, when they have these ranges of what's normal, and you fall outside that range, it doesn't mean that you have a problem, right? We just don't know that much about it. And like a lot of the studies were done on Europeans. If you happen not to be European or you happen to be mixed, your biology might be very poorly understood. And, thank God we're in the system now, but we're still suffering from that ignorance at that time when everybody just did studies on college students. They're mostly white kids. That's just changing now.
So it depends on basically the sample amount of what you use as a baseline.
How did they study? Did
so
they
historical
study it very
data
broadly? Mm-hmm. Sometimes a gene happens to be regionally contained, right? Like I've had some mutations show up, and people say like, "Oh, that," you get the report back. It's like, this is very common among Ashkenazi Jews. Well, that's just a coincidence, right? Turns out Japanese people have that too sometimes. But some of these genes are confined to just certain populations. Some of the mutations are found all across the earth. And often we haven't checked which of those two cases is true for a certain genetic test. And so we might be taking a test that's totally biased against us and will never do us any good because we're from the wrong region of people. We may be the test may be just as valid for us as for someone from Lithuania. That might happen too. And people often just don't know which of those two is the case when they do a study.
Yeah, because it's like, like indigenous, genes of the United States,
mm-hmm.
Or the Americas in general shows up as, the same as Asia. So it's like,
mm-hmm.
It's like, is there
just
a variance?
A little different. There is a little bit, but not a lot. You're right. And, it also depends, like, some of the countries just have their act together. Like the UK has had nationalized medicine for a long time. They have blood samples and health records for people over the past 100 years, or maybe something 70-ish, 80-ish years, right? They've been recording all their people's genomes there, and everybody's okay with it because it's a public health service. We're going to just know a lot more about people from the UK than from other countries. And that's just too bad for everybody else. But, other governments are just not doing that kind of work. That's gonna land as a real benefit to people who live in the UK and the citizens thereof. Other people just chose not to invest that way. So, what can they do about that? Not everybody's going to benefit from those decisions. It's too bad. We should all do it.
Wow. Yeah, it's just really deep when you start thinking about these genetic traits and then how, they're, like I know like even native genes in the Americas there's not that many samples because of
huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. Native genes. Yeah.
In the United States, but Mexico, it's a lot.
That's right. People just don't do the studies, and where the studies are depend on the kind of studies. And it makes a big difference. Like in the United States, all of us are so mixed. But a lot of us are from particular lines, right? And so we got this mixture of a lot of pure breeds that are really separate. And then we got all these mutts in here, sort of like mixtures of
I'm
this.
Definitely a mutt.
And so they just sort of like make decisions about drugs here, pharmaceuticals. They make those decisions based on the best guess. But if there's a drug that's very popular in Japan, they have to retest everything here, because in Japan is one of the most genetically homogeneous populations. And so a lot of the Japanese there's a lot of genes in the United States that Japanese people simply don't have. And that can cause the drug to be ineffective. It can make the drug dangerous in some cases. So it's kind of funny how that works. Like you can test the bejesus out of a drug in Asia and you still have to retest it completely here. And so that's how much of a difference it can make. Sometimes a big difference, sometimes a little one. It's just one of those.
Yeah, that's why I always sit there and tell people, I'm like, you shouldn't go off and tell, like, like America tries to, they try to pigeonhole or identify people or put them in they try to contain them in one group, no matter what they are. And it's like, you can't do that to scale, because literally when you go to the doctor and you come up with this genetic thing and it's just like, well, hey, you have this. And it's like, well, this only belongs to this people. But you're like checking this.
That's right.
It's like, are you lying?
It just turns out the truth is so complicated. I don't even.
Yeah, because does everyone want to hear that?
Yeah, no, but let's face it. Most people want to hear all that stuff.
Yeah. People like walk around like label themselves as lies. It's like, this is not really who you are, but this is who you are. And it's like, but society doesn't want to tell you.
It's all because we over summarize ourselves.
Right. You want to fit in with this group. So I think you're this Obama,
It's true. Well, I hope people will, I hope it's really great to dig in deep and sort of like see the real story. To me, it's always entertaining.
Right.
I don't know.
I mean, it's all about social constructs, and then it also goes back to more about colonialism and those ideals. So I think those things have like culturally, came about a lot of people in the United States. So it's still, they battle it every day. Like that is like to me, I feel like that's one of the biggest sicknesses in the United States is this reasoning or need to identify and label consistently and intricately. Like it's a little bit too far off. Like there's a difference of being able to say, hey, yeah, my mom comes from here. I have a family that comes from all these different places versus, but no, I need to know like one thing. Like this is too complicated for me. I need to identify you with one thing.
I think it's also about like, we don't really know how, I think most of us don't really know how to really be in touch with somebody, so we use these labels as a substitute for that. But really, if you learn someone's real story and where they're coming from, that's what everybody wants. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is.
It's too bad.
Well, Ron, it's been great having you on the podcast. It's been an amazing conversation. Again, and I'm going to tell you again, your public speaking, it's definitely worked, man. You're really good at that. Is there anything that you want to say, and leave to anyone who's an entrepreneur or anyone who wants to get their foot in the door with biology and
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm super happy to talk to anybody. I have a website, iaccelerate.tech, and there's a form to contact me if anybody wants to reach out. I'd love to talk to you about your idea and see if there's a way I could help you.
Awesome. I should do probably a podcast one time with some people and just have their idea and we talk about it and then get the investors.
Yeah, that'd be a good podcast, like 5 really amazing ideas. That's a good title.
Yeah. I just thought of it because you were just here and I was like, hey, wait,
there you go.
Might be fun. Might be fun.
I love it.
Yeah. But thank you again, Ron. It's been amazing to have you here. Definitely want to catch up with you and bring you on again. Great conversation. Really great person. Thank you.
Thanks. Totally enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Kids in the Room podcast.
That's right.
Brought to you by Move Faces TV. Let's go.